Now it is my pleasure to introduce Mike Lepech. So Mike is a professor of civil environmental engineering at Stanford and is also a senior fellow at Stanford Woods Institute for the Environment. He has several appointments across the Stanford campus, which are too long to go through right now. But most importantly, he is also the faculty director of Stanford Online's product management program. So we're so happy to have Mike here with us to lead this conversation with Ashmeet about his career trajectory from product management to venture capital. And now I'll hand things off to Mike.
Hey Liz, thanks so much. Great job on my bio saying my appointments across campus are too many to mention. That's very helpful. I'm really excited today to be welcoming Ashmeet to this discussion around sort of the future of people who want to go into product management and how he has experienced his career building off of his product management experience. So before we get into the discussion, a little bit about Ashmeet. He's the founder and chief engineer of Engineering Capital. And if you don't know what that is, check it out. It's an amazing organization. It invests before traditional venture firms and specializes in leading seed rounds in software companies with technical insight. Ashmeet's experience includes running venture capital funds and leadership positions helping build the industry-leading products VMware's ESX server and Silicon Graphics WebForce. So Ashmeet started his career at Hewlett-Packard and Silicon Graphics as an engineer. For the purposes of this webinar, it's most important to know that he then went to VMware, where he ran product management for their flagship product, ESX server. Now, following his product management role, he transitioned into venture capital, where he was a general partner at Foundation Capital, a leading Silicon Valley venture capital firm with about $2.4 billion under management. His successful investments include Azure and SignalFX, acquired by Splunk for $1 billion, Tubi TV, and a variety of others. He currently serves on the board of directors of Invinced, Cognitos, and Nexla. His additional active investments include Asmili, Kentic, Menlo Security, Robust Intelligence, vFunction, and YodaScale, in all of which he was the seed investor. Ashmeet received an MBA from Wharton with honors, an MS in computer science from Stanford University, and a BS in computer science, summa cum laude from USC. And interestingly, in his spare time, he can also be found planning his second trip to Mount Everest. So Ashmeet, thanks so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have this discussion with you.
Thank you, Mike. It's always fun to be back on the Stanford campus virtually in this case.
Well, it's always fun to have you here in person as well. So I guess my first question is, can you give us a little bit more information about your product management role at VMware and your responsibilities with regard to the overall product management team, and specifically with regard to ESX server?
So VMware was organized in a classical Silicon Valley product-led organization where we had functional groups running product management, marketing, sales, and engineering. I headed the product management function for ESX server, which eventually became the flagship product for VMware. When I joined VMware, this is right after the throes of the dot-com crash. I had actually just come back from Mount Everest from my first trip after having burned some energy after having sold the company, and wanted to get back to work and joined VMware when it was a small startup organization. Nobody had heard of us. We had a handful of millions in revenues, and ESX server was essentially an R&D project that was a technology sitting on the shelf, which we had conviction, the company had conviction would be an important product, but had not yet found product market fit. I was tasked with building that organization, finding product market fit, and running the entire product management function. The official title was Director of Product Management for ESX server. Eventually, we became over 90% of the revenue of the company. So essentially, you can think of VMware and ESX as synonymous in terms of the eventual evolution of what the company became.
Yeah, well, that's amazing that you go from what was functionally an R&D project that, yes, was on the shelf, but wasn't really a commercialized or a widely available product. Can you talk a little bit about launch right? And I'm sure at some point in there was a pretty interesting product launch, and we actually had some interesting discussions yesterday about product launch and how we know, like, when is a product ready to actually go. So you said it was kind of off the shelf, but there was a good product market fit. And can you talk a little bit how you guided the product team from sort of, yes, this nascent product, which looked very interesting, but then to actually launching and going out?
Yeah, so I think there's two questions embedded in the way you asked that, Mike, and I'd like to share a quick anecdote on the first one, on the first way I'm looking at it, which is the actual physical launch of the product. And of course, this is a small startup at this point, and I distinctly remember standing over there on 1st of July 2003 when we launched ESX2, and speaking to a handful of people in the room, which is the entire worldwide, sales and marketing
that was everybody at that point
of the company at that point, and standing over there and saying, we're launching ESX2, blah, 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 this is the positioning, etc. And I'll get into some of those details, and saying, one day there will be 1 million virtual machines in the world. And people actually laughed. So they thought, here he is, Ashmeet, smoking something interesting again. Things, because we literally had, no one using it, right? I mean, it was just such a simple thing. Fast forward 15 years, and today we have not millions, but billions of virtual machines now running in the world. Now, they're not all ESX virtual machines. Obviously, Amazon became a very important product in that space, Amazon AWS, and literally billions of machines run over there. But I would hazard a guess that today the entire cloud ecosystem, this On24 platform that we are running on, everybody who uses all the software on a daily basis, it all runs in a virtual machine. And so I'm extremely proud of the fact that, we took that position and we were able to do that. So in terms of launch, it is an act of belief. There has to be someone, in this case it was me and a handful of other people at VMware, who believed that virtual machines was a very powerful way to run software and the right way to run software in the long term. And that proved to be correct.
Yeah.
In terms
of go ahead.
I was just going to clarify that in terms of finding product market fit, that's a completely different process. That is one of the key jobs of a product manager. The product manager is tasked with taking all these disparate resources, engineering, marketing, sales, technology, studying the market, and coming up with what I call the answer, the product, and finding product market fit. This includes, for the product, this includes what is the packaging, what is the pricing, how are you going to promote it, how are you going to position it. All of the P's in the modern sense of a product really should be defined by a good product manager. And I hasten to add that there are companies where product management is sometimes glorified project management. That's a different task. Project managers are also important, and especially in larger companies, they can be very valuable. But product management is really the CEO of the product. It's the person who takes all those disparate resources and comes up with the strategy and the solution on what would be a successful product.
Well, and I think that's a really important, fabulous distinction to say, look, as a product manager, if you don't have some of the autonomy and authority to make some of those decisions, then it's something that needs to be looked at in a deeper way with regard to your roles and responsibilities. Because yes, you should be the de facto CEO of your product and your P&L, because that is a really important set of resources that a product manager needs to have, unlike a project manager, which is functionally trying to manage various resources across the matrix of a cross-functional organization.
Right. A project manager is a coordination function. A product manager is a strategy function. It's a function about how are you going to allocate resources to make those critical decisions. And the good decisions in strategy come out of a lot of hard work. There's a lot of repetitive, repeated learnings, trial and error, iteration that you have to do, perhaps no different than you may do in a lab when you are doing research, or no different than in sales when you're doing sales. But in product management, it's about bringing all of them together. So for example, in the specific case of ESX server, we never sold it as an operating system. Of course, it was an operating system. We never sold it as a hardware virtualization. Of course, we were doing hardware virtualization. We sold it as a server consolidation solution. And I distinctly remember the day I knew that was the answer. So one of the good habits that every product manager should practice is talking to customers. You've got to talk to customers on a regular basis. And you have to understand the customer better than the customer understands themselves. And I was on the phone with a customer at Bank of America who had purchased a copy of ESX server. And I asked him, so, why did you buy it? And he was like, well, Rob is a friend of mine and he's the sales guy. And he said, I should try it. And I was like, oh man, that's a terrible reason to buy a product. It's like, it's like your buddy sold it to you.
Yeah, how many friends does Rob have? Because you're going to need a lot of them.
Exactly. And so here's a phone call going downhill. But then I said, so what are you doing with it? And he said, oh, Microsoft has announced that Windows NT is going to be end of life. And I'm going to just put all my Windows NTs on them. And immediately my ears perked up. And I could literally feel the hair standing on the back of my neck because there is a lot of Windows NT being end of life in 2003. Microsoft had announced Windows 2003. They wanted to get rid of all the old versions. And I was like, aha, here's a use case. Here's a value proposition that can be replicated, that's unique, that we would have an unfair advantage on, which will have a very quick ROI, a very quick return on investment. And so, based on that, we were able to find product market fit. And server consolidation took us from $0 to $1 billion. The first $1 billion in revenues was really made on the backs of server consolidation at VMware. So
that's an amazing story of how customers can teach you so much, provided that you listen, and how important that is.
I could not repeat that more often, Mike. You have said the magic words. It really is about listening, and it's about listening without having happy ears. All of us, especially product managers, are optimists. We are looking to the future. We want things to happen. And so we suffer from what my mentor, Catherine, used to call happy ears. In other words, we listen to the part of the conversation that confirms what we are seeing, confirmation bias, and we'll ignore the other data points in terms of what they're saying. So product managers really have to be able to listen objectively. It is an essential skill for a product manager to practice. And like any good skill, it can be learned by iteration and practice. And it really can change your career if you listen very carefully and objectively to what the customers are saying. The truth is not in the room. The truth is not known to the product manager. The truth is in the customer's head. The truth is over there. But customers will not use the words that we want to use. So you have to listen carefully and you have to tease it out of them. You have to figure out what is it that they're really saying.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit to the focus of this webinar. So from product management at VMware, you transitioned to venture capital. Can you share with us a little bit about that experience, and then also, what do you think? Do you think there were specific things that you did as a product manager, that you learned as a product manager, that you practiced as a product manager, that made you the successful venture capitalist that you became and are today?
Yes, I was very fortunate to have worked as a product manager because I do believe that product management is an excellent training to be a venture capitalist. It is also excellent training to be a CEO, to be an entrepreneur. So there are many functions that come out of being a product manager because it is one of those rare jobs in a company where you have to look at the entire package and then break it down into the individual pieces and come up with a coherent answer. Most importantly, a product manager has to know how to say no. They have to say no to a whole bunch of stuff and prioritize what is it that you can do. You always have limited resources. You always have limited time. You always have competitive threats. All of these forces are working against you. And the only solution to all of them is prioritization. It is being able to take the signal away from the noise. And so that's what you learn to do as a product manager. And yes, that was very helpful to me in terms of making a transition to venture capital. The way it actually happened in my particular case was accidental. So VMware was sold relatively early in the journey of the company. We were sold, I believe, 2003 or 2004. In any case, in 2005, I was leaving VMware. I decided that I wanted to start another company and actually started spending time with some venture capitalists with the intention of raising money, including the good folks at Foundation Capital. And it was Mike Shu and Catherine, two of the senior partners there. Catherine was one of the founders, who literally said to me one day and said, "Hey, we'd love to fund you in your company and all of these new ideas that you're talking about, but have you ever thought of being a venture capitalist?" And so it was literally at the Christmas party, and so I was like, that's an interesting question. Why do you ask? So, one thing led to another, and they said, you should spend some time with us, in a venture partner, sort of as a temporary partner type of role. Let's get to know each other better, and then if we like you, we'll bring you in as a real partner. And so I was there as a general partner, then as a managing partner for the last 3 years, managing a large firm. And they trained me. I learned venture capital thanks to Mike Shu, Catherine Gould, Bill Elmore, sort of the founders of the firm. And I do believe that the product management skills of prioritization, of listening to conflicting data, there's no such thing as a perfect investment. Anytime you diligence an investment as a venture capitalist, you're going to get conflicting data. You have to then make the judgment of which data to prioritize, which investment to prioritize, how to deal with it, just like a product manager does. There's always happy customers and unhappy customers, customers who created value, customers who haven't received value. Your job as a product manager is to figure out where is the signal in that noise.
Well, I guess two points on that. One of the things that, of course, well, is we always talk with aspiring or practicing venture capitalists or angel investors about the importance of a thesis and having conviction and saying, look, this is what I think the future is going to look like. And therefore, these are the types of firms that I am going to invest in. And, talking back about your launch anecdote with ESX Server, you had a conviction as a product manager that, yes, someday, so many of these machines were going to be virtual in nature. And in some regards, it's the formation of that type of conviction, that type of idea, that is analogous to the formation of an investment thesis. Yeah, an investment thesis is a little bit broader, but it requires you to look at an industry sector, to think about trends that are happening and what it's going to take to make that future happen. Which is such a big part of venture capital investing.
Yeah, so the way I like to describe the opinions that a product manager or a venture capitalist should have is strong opinions, lightly held. You need to have strong opinions. In other words, you've got to have clarity of vision. They've got to be strong. They've got to be based on facts. They've got to be something where you have done the hard work to identify why you have that opinion. But they have to be lightly held because the world is changing very quickly. If anything, it's getting faster. It's not getting slower. You have to be able to react to the world moving around you. And, both as a product manager and as a venture capitalist, speed is an enormous competitive advantage. And the particular product management story that I like to give people is to talk about product market fit in the context of Facebook. So Facebook, everybody's familiar with, is a fabulous company. They were venture funded. They did a great job. They found product market fit, and they were growing very, very quickly. Newsfeed was working. Advertising was working. Lots of users were coming in. Engagement was going up, and they were printing money. And then one day, Cambridge Analytica happens. In the UK, there is a privacy scandal. Information comes out in how information is being shared, etc. Nothing that was done by Facebook themselves on that particular day or week or month. The actual actions had taken place years in the past. And in one instant, product market fit changed for Facebook. Facebook went from having perfect product market fit to having a declining product market fit. And it continues to decline to this day, to the point that I would be so bold as to say that they don't have product market fit. And now Mark Zuckerberg has given up on the core product of Facebook. And the future of Facebook, or Meta, is really about the metaverse and WhatsApp. In other words, instant messaging and 3D, VR, AR, etc. Nothing to do with the origin where product market fit was so perfect in the original news feed. So it changes. So you can have a strong opinion, you can be working, firing on all cylinders, and then in an instant, the world changes around.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true, and I do like that idea. Strong opinions, lightly held. The other thing that I think from a venture capital standpoint is we always talk about the idea of smart money, meaning that it's not just a check for an entrepreneur. It's that you want, yes, money is great, but you want support. You want confidants that will give your company great advice. And just as importantly, you want people on your board of directors, normally an institutional investor, if that's the case, that can provide more value than just simply writing that check. And in your experience as a product manager, I can see that you were incredibly valuable to product-focused startups that were in a phase of needing to get prepared for launch and sort of manage that product introduction and growth and scaling because you had done it at VMware. And you can provide at least some really good guidance on what that process looks like, much more so than potentially another investor that doesn't have that experience.
Mike, you're very kind to recognize that I may be able to add value from my product management skills. And of course, I do strive to do that. And yes, I believe all good venture capitalists should strive to help their companies. The unfortunate reality is that on average, I believe venture capitalists are a net negative. So perhaps I'm too cynical, but
point out that you are calling the kettle black to
so
some extent.
I'm grateful to be recognized that way. But because venture capitalists give money, and money, of course, is very attractive to most people. People there's a halo effect around venture capital. Mm-hmm. Now, I believe the great venture capitalists can add tremendous value. And I'm very proud of a couple of instances where I have been able to add value to my portfolio companies that the CEOs have then subsequently recognized. And there's some quotes on my website and things like that in terms of where really there was an inflection point that I was able to impact. But those are rare, and you have to be careful and thoughtful as a venture capitalist in terms of overlaying your operating background onto the position of the company. The rule of thumb that I like to give, and I've hired many people and trained them as venture capitalists. Several GPs now at Foundation Capital were hired by me and to some extent mentored and trained by me. The rule of thumb that I like to tell new venture capitalists, people who are transitioning from, let's say, a product management role or perhaps some other leadership role in an organization is, you will probably have great ideas 10 times an hour when you're sitting in your first few board meetings. On average, you should think that you will share that idea once a year. That's the numbers of orders of magnitude of how much you have to recalibrate yourself. In other words, you will think of a great suggestion, a great input, a great idea, and you mean it with the best of intentions. Here's the CEO, he's running hard, she's running hard, she's got ideas, and you're like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? You should do this better. You should not do this. You should spend it there. And you will get 10 ideas an hour, and you get one chance a year to share an idea. So keep your mouth shut and listen and prioritize, because you're only going to get one bullet a year. And that's the calibration that I think really helps people understand how much you have to attenuate your operating experience before you really start applying it. Nobody knows the position as well as the CEO of a company. She is the one who has as perfect a knowledge as you can get in the fog of war that she is fighting as the leader of the company. You have imperfect information, vastly imperfect information. And so you have to be very careful in terms of how you give advice over there. And that's one of the traps, and that's one of the reasons why VCs end up with bad reputations on boards, just trying to give advice which is just not well received for the right reasons.
Right. Well, and recognize a failure to recognize that your responsibility is one of fiduciary responsibility, and of course to provide good counsel and leadership, but not to run the company. Absolutely.
So well said, Mike. You are not running the company. If you're running the company, you have made two mistakes. Number one, you picked the wrong CEO. You picked the wrong company.
That is
Okay,
true.
you shouldn't have made that investment. Number two, you don't know what your job is as a VC.
Yeah.
So you should definitely not be running the company. You have many roles as a venture capitalist in a company. Certainly, one of them is to give advice. Certainly, one of them is a fiduciary of your investments that you have made, and you are, representing as a general partner. Thirdly, you are often a representative of all the other shareholders, so you're
Yeah.
bringing that. Fourthly, sometimes you're just there for PR value. You're there because your name is going to be leveraged in a press release, on a website, in a recruiting function, etc.
Yep.
Fourthly, you are there as a recruiter. Your job is to help the CEO recruit great people, bring them onto the team, help them, bring them to customers. Fourthly, you're there as a Rolodex. You're there to
Mhm.
provide contacts. So you have many roles that you can play as a venture capitalist that are additive to a CEO, but you are not there to run the company. If you're running the company, you have already made two mistakes.
Sure, sure. All right. So one of the questions that came in was, prioritization and resource allocation takes a lot of time and effort, but the market does indeed change quickly. And what would be your advice on how to balance the effort in prioritizing and making sure that, yes, you do have a workflow, you are making progress, versus being agile and responding to changes in the market, but recognizing that every single change in prioritization requires time, it consumes limited resources, and you can't just simply be reactionary in nature all the time.
Yes, so this is a great example of where you need good judgment. Good judgment involves making these types of trade offs, and it is an art. It comes from experience and iteration. We have to understand that as product managers, as venture capitalists, you have extremely limited resources. Microsoft will always have more engineers than your startup will have. Google will always have more distribution than your startup will ever have. Yet, we are in some ways competing, cooperating, participating in an ecosystem with them. And so you do have to prioritize and work against them. So let me make a couple of, give a little bit of background and then come to this decision. You can learn a lot by watching great product managers prioritize. And one of the best examples of that is Steve Jobs. So, Steve Jobs is, in my opinion, one of the greatest product managers that we ever had. And go and watch the launch video of the iPhone. 2007, Steve Jobs launches the iPhone. And what is his launch video? It's about half an hour long. And what does he say? He says, you can listen to music, you can browse the internet, and you can make phone calls. You can listen to music, you can browse the internet, you can make phone calls. You can listen to music, you can browse the internet, and you can make phone calls. And he repeats that again and again and again in his launch video. That is where the reason he was able to do that is because he had said no to every other possible feature that could have been added to the iPhone, all of which were subsequently added. The iPhone eventually became a platform. Remember, the original iPhone did not have an app store. You could
Right.
not add new applications to it. And in fact, Steve resisted the idea of an app store for a while. So the idea is to prioritize, to eliminate, and pick the things that matter. Steve obviously picked the right three things to build the iPhone, to the point that very smart people, when they heard what he had done, thought he had made a great mistake. In fact, if you want to watch a great video, go online on YouTube. You can search for Steve Ballmer iPhone launch reaction, because he happened to be on stage when the iPhone was launched, not on the iPhone stage, in a different place, and he was actually recorded. So we have video proof of Steve hearing for the first time. Steve Ballmer at that time is the CEO of Microsoft, and we
Mm-hmm.
have a recording of Steve reacting to being told what is in the iPhone. Obviously, Steve Jobs had done a great job of hyping up the launch and bringing up marketing, so everybody knew he was going to launch a new product, but nobody quite knew what it was that he was going to launch. And the magic reaction, most people forget, the number one selling smartphone in the world, launched operating system smartphone in the world in 2007, was the Windows Phone.
Mm.
Windows operating system was the #1 smartphone operating system in the world when the iPhone was launched. And Steve Ballmer's reaction, who is the CEO of the company that has obviously got this successful product, says, $500? There's no, let's see what
No one will
happens.
ever pay $500 for it.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm sitting over here with a $1,200 iPhone in front of me. Obviously, Steve Ballmer did not understand how much budget was available for a high quality user experience, integrated experience to bring in those two essential capabilities. The music, I believe, was a legacy feature. I mean, that was Steve Jobs
Oh yeah,
leveraging.
no, absolutely. That was just leveraging iTunes.
Was clearly leveraging iTunes and iPod. And it was really about building a phone and a browser together and doing it in a way that is just, fabulous prioritization. The hardest thing to do is to say no. It is not to say yes. And so the bar and what a product manager really, really needs to do is learn how to say no. You really, really have to say no and revisit. Every time you add a feature, you should say no. Every time you add a feature, you should say no. And here's a thumb rule that I like to recommend to people. The best software in the world till today has never been written by a team greater than a two-pizza team. In other words, a team that you can feed with two pizzas. And so you really have to think in terms of, the iPhone software, the browser was written literally by two people, not even two pizzas. You could feed them with half a pizza.
Yeah.
The greatest software has been written by very, very small teams. And so you have to prioritize.
I want to state that again, just so that it becomes clear. You refer to the two pizza team, which is thinking about the products that you're working on and developing that to streamline and not have some large team that continues to add features for the sake of, wow, this is really cool. Is it what the customer actually needs? And this rule of thumb on a two pizza team, a team that can be fed by an order of two pizzas, I think is a really unique way to look at it. So what advice would you give to either aspiring or practicing product managers with regard to just a couple of skills that they should be learning or sharpening while in their role to think about that next job, whether it's venture capital, whether it's moving up into leadership of a large organization, whatever their goals are? And maybe if I can say one of them is saying no. That's what I've heard as one of the lessons here, is that's a skill set you should learn well. Say no to things and learn how to say no in a way that doesn't close doors, that allows for future add-ons, for future features, for future improvements, but allows you to stay focused on what needs to happen today.
Yes, and the best way of learning how to say no is to prioritize, to think of everything that you do in life, every organization, every email, every conversation, every PowerPoint that you work on has a prioritization to it. There's a sequence to it, and then just cut off the bottom 80%. If you cut it off, which is really, really hard to do emotionally, you will learn that you are genuinely prioritizing. What is it that you really want to do? I happen to be someone who loves adventure travel, who loves to be outside, loves nature. I love backpacking. And think about loading your backpack. Obviously, if you have more food, if you have more equipment, it's going to help you in some situations. But guess what? It's all going to go on your back. You're going to have to physically carry that extra weight. And there's nothing that makes you prioritize better than knowing that you're going to be trudging, with that load on your back for the next few days. So that's a visualization. That's a way of thinking about what you do in terms of particular skills that they should build. In addition to, horizontal skills like being able to say no or being able to prioritize, a very important vertical skill that you must practice is you have to specialize. The world is too vast, the knowledge is too much, change is too much, that you must specialize in something. You have to choose that for yourself. What is that specialization? In my case, it happens to be computer science. Within computer science, it's software infrastructure. Within software infrastructure, it's very early stage cloud, AI, data-based infrastructure. Within that, it happens to be investing. I don't have a PhD in AI. But I have spent many years thinking about investing in AI before product market fit at that stage, and I can talk about where those things are. So you have to specialize, which is itself an act of prioritization. In other words, you have to say no to everything else, and then you got to get good at that. So people have to know who you are, and what you should be known for, and that is the way in which you can develop and advance yourself in an organization, in your career. Again, it's a hard thing to do. Smart people like to do everything. They are interested in everything. And so you have to make those trade-offs in terms of what you're going to do. And if you specialize well, then you will pick an area and an industry and a space that is dynamic, that is growing quickly, that is expanding, where you will have more opportunities.
A good friend of mine who runs a Fortune 100 company tells folks that at some point in their life and in their career, they have to, quote, monk it up. And what he means by this is the difference between being a monk and being a church priest. One of them who's incredibly focused and isn't distracted by the outside world and everything that comes with, say, running a church or running an outside organization, and is only focused on one thing very, very clearly. And he says, everyone at some point in life has to either choose to do that or choose to be a generalist. And the successful folks over time have decided at some point that you have to have that monk experience that will always allow you to go back and say, this is my expertise, this is what I do, this is my core, and I will build everything off of this.
Yes, you have to go back and forth. I completely agree. We want broad skills. You have to have horizontal skills and you have to have vertical skills, and both skills are essential for building, for building your career up and building your skills up. And you tend to go back and forth. But even within them, there is an act of specialization. As much as I enjoy nature, as much as I enjoy the outdoors, for me, that's a recreational activity. I'm never going to be a world-class mountain climber. I'm never going to win a gold medal in skiing. I'm never going to do any of those things. And I have no illusions about that. So that's just, a choice that was made very early in my life.
Absolutely. I would like to point out that you are a mountain climber who has done Everest and is preparing for a second ascent. So it's not that you're not good at being outdoors in nature. You can still be highly effective in things where you don't necessarily consider your core expertise.
Well, human beings have amazing capacities, but I do have to correct one thing in the record. I did not summit. So I am not summited. So in other words, I'm a failed mountain climber. But human beings our capacities are vastly more than we give ourselves credit for. And when we put pressure on ourselves, is when really the truth comes out. And that's why you hear about these exceptional stories about people at times of war, or people in times of stress or accident, or people who commit themselves to startups in these very interesting ways, will do what feel like amazing things, but they're really just people who have pushed themselves to a true limit, who truly push themselves to a limit.
No, it's absolutely true. So a couple of questions that have come in. So you're a product manager, and let's say it happens that you're not well aligned with the CEO. Especially in the early stages. What do you do? How do you manage conflict like this? And can you be an effective product manager if you're not in line with the CEO? And I guess it probably is determined to some extent how big the product is as part of the P&L for the whole company.
Yeah, that's a really difficult problem to have. And there's a few reasons why you may have. So let's first diagnose, why are you not aligned with the CEO? One reason, and a benign reason, could be because the CEO just doesn't have the same information that you have, and you just haven't done a good job of educating the CEO and the rest of the company on what those opportunities are and why you believe a certain fact in which you are aligned in a different place. If that's the case, that's clearly something that requires communication. That can be solved by communication. That is something that requires you to up your game on how you explain and articulate and elucidate the opportunity so that other people can get aligned behind you. Remember, most product managers don't have the authority, they just have the responsibility. And so you have to work by influence. You have to work indirectly. You have to present a great case study where it is so glaringly obvious to the listener what the right answer is over there. Now, we also know in the era of fake news and in a post-truth world that sometimes people will just not listen to facts. Yeah. Sometimes people make up their minds regardless of the facts around them. Then you have a fatal problem. Then you are working in the constraints of a system where either you have to decide that there is an alternative path within the worldview of the CEO that is also a path to success, and then you have to change your mind and work in that alternative set of facts, or you have to give up, and it may well be a fatal problem and say that it cannot work over there. But that's rare. That is really rare in my experience. When I have mentored product managers and I have worked with people, most of the time, especially in the B2B enterprise, cloud infrastructure, the spaces that I work in the enterprise software IT space, people are rational actors. They want to make money. They want to understand what customers are doing. And if you really have good if you understand the customer better than anyone else, other people will see it. They will be convinced and they will follow you. That's usually what's required.
No, I think your comment that it's in some regards on you as the product manager to make sure that your CEO is completely informed of why you see this as such a big potential is spot on. All right, just in the last minute or so, a question around credentialing in both attaining and being successful in a role like being a VC, and then maybe even a role as a product manager in a technical organization. How necessary is a degree in, say, computer science, like you have, or an MBA, or things like this, or do you think it can all be learned? And I guess this is partly in the context of the credentialing that we do in our product management certificate program.
So I am a fan of formal education, whether it's a degree, whether it's a certificate, whether it's a program that you do. It is a way of accelerating your knowledge and speeding up your ability to go and do something. Can you learn it without a credential? Yes. I mean, famous people have, read books, gone online, listened to talks, and have been able to do it. But the advantage of a credential is that some other thoughtful set of people prioritized what you need to know, organized it in a fashion that is logical and hopefully expands and is easy for you to understand and grow with, and then given you a package deal. So a credential, whether it's a degree, whether it's a certificate, is a fabulous way of accelerating your knowledge in a domain, which is why I, went to school 3 times, post-secondary education, and I continue to do a lot of executive education courses. I go to seminars, I listen to, conferences, because it's a way of accelerating your knowledge. Are there alternative ways of doing it? Can you succeed as a product manager without a credential? Yes, of course it's possible. There's nothing that is so secret or so hidden that you can only learn it as a secret craft. No, but if you want to accelerate, go for it. I mean, it's one of the greatest ROIs that you can have is to educate yourself.
Well, and I think that's a great way to wrap up this webinar. I want to thank you, Ashmeet, for your thoughtfulness and your time today. I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't already visited it, check out Engineering Capital, because it's a fascinating organization that also is the place where Ashmeet posts a lot of his thought leadership in many areas related to this. And so I'm going to turn it back over now after saying thank you so much to Ashmeet, to Liz, so she can wrap us up. Liz.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Ashmeet, and apologies to the audience for not getting to your questions. We hope you found this conversation engaging nonetheless. If you are interested in learning more about product management, you can visit our website, online.stanford.edu, to find more information about our offerings in product management and other topics. Thanks again, everyone.